Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. La Familia Michoacana, or simply La Familia, wasn't born like most Mexican cartels. While many Mexican criminal groups focused purely on drugs and profits, La Familia presented itself as a moral crusade. At least that's how their leaders wanted it to look. The organization was formed by Carlos Rosales Mendoza, though it wasn't until his arrest in 2004 that the cartel turned into a different pseudo-religious direction. In the early to mid-2000s, Nazario Moreno Gonzalez, also known as El Mas Loco, the craziest one, took control of a faction of traffickers in Michoacán. But Moreno wasn't just another narco boss. He saw himself as a prophet, writing his own pseudo-religious manifesto that mixed Christian rhetoric with cartel discipline. Members were required to live by a strict code, no using drugs, loyalty to the Brotherhood, and absolute obedience to the leadership. At first, La Familia gained power by selling meth and cocaine, but they weren't content with being another trafficking group. They positioned themselves as the protectors of the Michoacán people. They handed out aid to the poor, gave loans to struggling families, and presented themselves as kind of a shadow government. But behind that public image was a reign of terror. Their brutality became infamous. Beheadings, mass killings, and gruesome public displays of violence weren't just methods of control, they were theatrics. Each act of violence was a performance meant to send a message: join us, obey us, or be destroyed. And because they cloaked themselves in a cult-like ideology, many recruits believed that they weren't just criminals, but instead they were part of a righteous mission. This allowed La Familia to grow rapidly, establishing deep roots across Michoacán and beyond. By the mid-2000s, they were arguably the third largest cartel in Mexico, behind Sinaloa and the Gulf Cartel. This was largely due to their close alliance with the Golfos, who let them use their drug corridors, and critically, they helped train La Familia gunmen by sending their armed wing Los Zetas down to Michoacán to train La Familia Sicarios. In 2006, however, La Familia Michoacana broke relations with the Gulf Cartel and the Zetas. When this happened, Moreno Gonzalez heralded the organization's independence when several of his gunmen tossed 5 human heads onto a discotheque dance floor in Michoacán. Near the severed heads lay a message that read, "La Familia doesn't kill for money, doesn't kill women, doesn't kill innocents. Only those who deserve to die will die." In 2009, the Mexican government published a list of its 37 most wanted drug lords and offered $2.2 million in rewards for information that led to Moreno Gonzalez's capture. His 3 partners, Jose de Jesus Mendez Vargas, Servando Gomez Martinez, and Denicio Loya Plancarte were also on the list. In 2010, La Familia would once again form an alliance with the Gulf Cartel, following the acrimonious split between the Golfos and Los Zetas, which transcended into one of the most brutal cartel wars that Mexico had ever seen. At this time, La Familia also formed some alliances with the Sinaloa cartel. After that, La Familia Michoacana became one of the fastest growing cartels in Mexico's drug war. It stood out for its promotion of family values and religious agenda, unlike traditional cartels. Although deeply involved in the methamphetamine business, Moreno Gonzalez's cartel diversified its criminal agenda by controlling numerous counterfeiting, extortion, kidnapping, armed robbery, prostitution, and car dealership rings in Michoacán and nearby states. Moreno Gonzalez required his men to carry a spiritual manual that he wrote himself, containing pseudo-Christian aphorisms for self-improvement. In his Bible, Moreno Gonzalez prohibited his men from consuming alcoholic beverages or other drugs, and stated that he would severely punish those who mistreated women. His writings encouraged the corporal punishment of thieves by beating them and making them walk naked with billboards in the city streets. He prohibited members of his cartel from consuming or selling methamphetamine in Michoacán, arguing that the drug was only to be smuggled into the USA for American consumers. Moreno Gonzalez justified drug trafficking by stating that La Familia Michoacana regulated the drug trade to prevent exploitation of the people. The book, sometimes known as The Sayings of the Craziest One, also talks about humility, service, wisdom, brotherhood, courage, and God. His second book, titled They Call Me the Craziest One, is 13 chapters long and talks about his life, idealism, the origins of La Familia Michoacana, their battle against Los Zetas, and his rationale for joining organised crime. The text reads like a diary and justifies his criminal activities under the rationale that, just like others in Michoacán, the limited opportunities and his poor financial situation pushed him to get involved in the drug trade. In addition, Gonzalez blamed the government for the existence of criminals. Despite his brutality, Nazario Moreno Gonzalez did garner support from small communities in Michoacán state, as he would frequently fund schools, grant farmers affordable loans, and he would contribute large sums to local churches. This would play into his quasi-religious PR campaigns, and many would revere Nazario as a protector, almost in the role of a Robin Hood, giving to the poor while stealing from the rich, that sort of thing. And the years following 2010, Nazario would even be revered as a saint by some. By late 2010, due to their rapid growth, law enforcement in Mexico focused on the dismantling of La Familia Michoacana under the then leadership of Mexican President Felipe Calderón, who centered his militarized war on drugs in his home state of Michoacán. Between the 9th and 10th of December 2010, federal forces fought a sprawling 2-day series of clashes against cartel members around Apatzingan in Michoacán. In the aftermath, the Calderón administration's national security spokesman, Alejandro Poyer, announced that Moreno had been killed. Crucially, the authorities did not recover a body. Mexican officials said that gunmen had carried it off, leaving a gap that rumour and doubt quickly filled. Press coverage at the time underscored both the government's certainty and the absence of physical proof, a combination that would haunt Mexico's credibility. With no corpse, the dead capo seemed to reappear everywhere. Local residents, clergy, and later the region's vigilante leaders, also known as autodefensors, insisted that he was still alive. Shrines to Moreno proliferated, and his followers recast him as a kind of narco saint that resurrected. The persistence of sightings and veneration magnified doubts about the 2010 announcement and eroded trust in the federal claims amid Mexico's broader drug war. Before dawn on the 9th of March 2014, Mexican security forces located Moreno in the rugged municipality of Tumbiscatio in Michoacán. He opened fire and was killed in the exchange. This time, authorities produced the body and quickly moved to forensic confirmation. Officials from the Attorney General's office announced that fingerprint matches confirmed 100% that the deceased was Moreno. Subsequent testing took place, again confirming that the deceased was Moreno, and guarded transfers of the remains underscored the government's determination not to repeat the 2010 errors. Independent reporting the same day detailed the location and circumstances, making clear that the undead drug lord was at last dead. At this time, La Familia Michoacana splintered after the death of Moreno, as well as the capture of other high-profile leaders. Many members of La Familia had split to join a separate Michoacán cartel, known as the Knights Templar, and by the mid-2010s, La Familia were pretty much decimated. Though the Knights Templar, which was actually partly founded by Nazario Moreno Gonzalez during his fake death, also started to fall apart in the mid-2010s following the arrest of their leader, Servando Gomez Martinez, aka La Tuta. Despite La Familia and the Knights Templar being totally decimated by law enforcement, this did not lead to less violence in Michoacán state. Instead, CJNG quickly tried to take advantage of the situation by flooding the state with gunmen, which only served to increase violence, as they were met with resistance by a group of localized cartels who banded together, known as Carteles Unidos. Other groups, such as Los Viagras, Guerreros Unidos, and El Megaladas, have also contributed to a great deal of violence in recent years in Michoacán. Another group have also made their presence known in Michoacán state in recent years, this group being La Nueva Familia Michoacana, essentially a rebrand of the original organisation, though with totally new leaders who had nothing or little to do with the original organisation. The new La Familia cartel are led by a pair of brothers, Johnny Hurtado Olascoaga and Jose Alfredo Hurtado Olascoaga, and the pair have quickly gone on to become two of Michoacán's most wanted criminals. In April of 2025, the US Department of Justice unsealed an indictment charging the brothers with large-scale drug manufacturing and distribution conspiracies, and the US State Department is offering multi-million-dollar rewards for information leading to their capture. The Hurtado siblings are described in US government materials and media reporting as longtime figures in the organized crime landscape of West Central Mexico, who rebuilt and now co-lead La Nueva Familia Michoacana, LNFM. Authorities say that LNFM constitutes a full-service criminal enterprise, controlling territory, producing and moving illicit drugs, and overseeing businesses and money laundering networks to monetize and shield criminal proceeds. Johnny is portrayed as the top leader, with Jose Alfredo as his deputy and operational lieutenant. According to the US indictment and related agency statements, the organisation under the brothers' command is charged and accused of the following principal activities. The grand jury indictment alleges that LNFM members conspired to manufacture and traffic multiple controlled substances, knowing that they would be imported into the United States. Federal prosecutors specifically named fentanyl, methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine among the drugs tied to the conspiracy. DOJ and US agencies characterize LNFM as a transnational organization that arranges cross-border shipments, distribution networks in the United States, and coordination with other Mexican groups to move tonnages of drugs. Indictment and Treasury actions note associated money laundering schemes and use of front companies and ranches to conceal and move proceeds. The Treasury Department has used sanctions to try and choke the group's financial channels. Media reporting and government statements attribute LNFM to the routine use of kidnapping, extortion, forced displacement, and murder to secure territory, extract revenue, and intimidate rivals and the civilian population. Analysts say that these tactics allow the cartel to control municipal governments and local economies in parts of Guerrero, the state of Mexico, and Michoacán. US authorities report that the brothers have cultivated networks and working relationships with other Mexican cartels and criminal facilitators where beneficial, including serving at times as intermediaries with groups such as Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, to source precursors, coordinate shipments, or expand distribution channels. LNFM allegedly operates clandestine production sites, compartmentalized distribution cells, and cross-border distribution conduits into the US market, while using violence and corruption to protect those operations. The brothers' organization has a powerful local and regional footprint, especially in the Tierra Caliente region of Mexico. By imposing control over municipalities through violence and extortion, LNFM weakens local government capacity and public safety. Journalistic investigations and government descriptions indicate that the group's reach extends into dozens of municipalities, affecting local commerce, policing, and everyday life. Businesses and residents face taxes and protection payments. Agricultural supply chains, transporters, and informal economies are often disrupted. Kidnappings, selective killings of rivals and suspected informants, and confrontations with state forces produce cycles of fear and displacement, eroding social cohesion and prompting local self-defense responses in some areas. The trafficking of fentanyl and other synthetic opioids has contributed to overdose fatalities and public health crises in the United States. US agencies emphasize LNFM's role in transporting and supplying such substances northward. That international harm intensifies pressure from US law enforcement and diplomatic channels. Ultimately, Johnny and Jose Alfredo Hurtado are presented by the US authorities as the twin leaders of La Nueva Familia Michoacana, an organization that combines large-scale drug trafficking manufacture and trafficking with violent territorial control and financial criminality. Their alleged activities have direct consequences for public safety, governance, and the economy in Michoacán and adjacent states, and for drug-related harm in the United States. The group have quietly grown into a major regional power in recent years, with their brutality being one of their calling cards. Though they are not as prone to uploading graphic videos as other cartels, though the videos that they have uploaded over the years have been shocking, notably the gutting of a supposed CJNG Sicario a couple of years back, and recently a new video made the rounds detailing the savage execution of an alleged rival. The video in question is testament, in my opinion, to the fact that what makes many of these videos extra shocking are the sounds that go along with them, and this video is especially haunting. But nevertheless, what happens in the actual video? The video is brutal, so I can show little by the way of still images. As you play the video, you are met with the horrific sight of a blindfolded captive who is laying on the ground in the middle of a forest during daylight hours. It's clear that the victim already has a laceration on the side of his head, meaning the barbarity started before the camera started rolling. When the video begins, you hear the cameraman shouting, "Now! Now!" giving the Sicario standing over the victim the heads up that the camera is now rolling. Immediately, the Sicario standing over the victim smashes the captive in the face with a machete, which causes the victim to instinctively cover his face with his hands. The person filming immediately shouts, destroy his hands to hell." He shouts this repeatedly. The hitman follows the instructions and brutally hacks away at the captive's hands, which he's using to try and protect his head and face. He strikes over and over and over again, and after each strike, the victim's hands get progressively more bloody and mangled. The hitman also mixes up his strikes, at times hitting the captive in the body and also the arms. The victim also tries to roll around on the ground to evade the blows to no avail. It's a complete maniacal hack job, but at this point, the victim hasn't screamed or uttered a word. The person filming shouts, "This is how they're all going to end up." He continues by saying, hit him, hit him." A second voice off camera then shouts, "Destroy his feet and his head, to all hell." The person filming and the others watching the brutality sound like a pack of bloodthirsty hyenas. The captive at this point is a bloody mess, but he's still alive. The Sicario mixes up his attacks, sometimes hitting arms, sometimes hitting legs, and sometimes hitting the face. You hear the blade make chinging noises as it hits bone. At this point, out of nowhere, the victim finally makes noise, and he begins screeching, "Papa, Papa!" He's screaming for his dad. He screams this repeatedly, but at the same time, he begins to lose the ability to protect himself. The Sicario takes the opportunity to begin smashing the victim in the skull with his blade, all whilst he is still screaming for his dad. The Sicario then lands what looks to be the killer blow. He smashes the machete into the side of the victim's skull, as he was halfway through screeching for his dad for the last time. His voice just stops, and you hear a gurgling exhale of air. The last machete blow had a loud crack to it. I think this fractured the victim's skull. The first video ends here. There is a second video, however, showing the Sicarios mocking the corpse. In the second video, you get close-up views of the damage inflicted on the captive's head. His face is covered in blood and deep lacerations, and then the body is turned over, and you see the back of the skull, and it's totally destroyed. You see what looks like shards of broken skull bone protruding from the lacerations, and it also looks like that you see the victim's brain, but it's hard to be sure due to how bloody it is. What is obvious though, is that the back of the skull has been destroyed. During the second video, the person filming, who has a nasally voice, states the following: "He looks like Scarface reborn. Flip him over, Kevin, to his back, so we can see his injury." Once this is done, the killer replies, "Look at how I've left his head, dude, all prepared and cut up like picadillo." More shit talk goes on, but these lines in particular highlight the depraved nature of the perpetrators. The second video ends once they have filmed the injuries. So there you have it, a very haunting video. Pure savagery is the only way to put it, and the sounds of the captive pleading for his dad are purely nightmare-inducing. So yeah, there we have it, a new video from La Nueva Familia Michoacana. I hope you enjoyed this video if you can enjoy this sort of content. If you're new here, if you could always hit subscribe, that would be much appreciated. As always, the links to my social media will be in the pinned comment below, so feel free to check those out, my Twitter, my Twitch, etc. But aside from that, thank you for the support, and as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.